What if your biggest weakness isn't what you think? What if it's something so silent, so invisible, that it's been corroding your life every single day without you noticing? Most people believe their weakness is obvious. They point to laziness, procrastination, distraction. They blame lack of discipline, lack of focus, lack of time. But the real weakness, the one that quietly destroys potential, isn't on the surface. It's not the flaw you can name. It's the one hiding in plain sight, shaping your choices in ways you barely recognize. And because you don't see it, you don't fight it. You defend it. You excuse it. And while you're busy doing that, it eats away at everything you could become. Think about your last week. How many times did you tell yourself, "I'll do it tomorrow"? How many times did you say, "It's not urgent yet"? How many times did you choose comfort over growth, while convincing yourself it was the reasonable decision? That voice feels safe, doesn't it? But that's exactly how weakness survives. It never announces itself. It disguises itself as logic, as self-care, as balance. And you believe it, because believing it keeps you comfortable. But here's the cost. Every time you let that invisible weakness win, you lose more than a task, more than a moment. You lose identity. You send yourself a message, "I can't trust me." And once that message repeats often enough, it becomes who you are. That's why people stay stuck for years. Not because they aren't working hard, not because they aren't motivated, but because, without realizing it, they have trained themselves to lose the small battles that decide everything. Covey often taught that real change never starts on the surface. It doesn't start with what you do. It starts with what governs what you do. If you live blind to the principle running your life, no strategy, no technique, no motivation can save you. And for most people, the hidden principle that rules them is weakness. A principle that says, avoid discomfort, stay safe, protect the familiar. That's why they never break through. Because the invisible always wins over the visible. This video is not about tricks, hacks, or empty motivation. You don't need another speech telling you to try harder. You already know how to push yourself. And if effort alone could fix your life, you wouldn't be here right now. What you need is to expose the enemy that's been operating silently inside you. You need to see the weakness you've been protecting, the weakness you've been mistaking for logic, and finally confront it for what it really is, the silent killer of your potential. And here's the promise. In the next minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how that weakness sneaks into your life, how it reshapes your identity without permission, and how to transform it into strength before it steals another year from you. Because you need to understand, this isn't just about productivity. It's about who you become. And if you don't face it now, you'll look back one day and realize the person you could have been never had a chance to live. So don't make the mistake most people make. Don't listen to the first 3 minutes and tell yourself you've got it. That's your weakness talking. That's the voice that says, you'll remember later. You won't. You'll go back to the same pattern, because that's what weakness does. It convinces you to settle before the breakthrough. Don't let it win again. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal might be the single most important shift you'll ever make. At the end of this journey, you'll not only know how to recognize your hidden weakness, but you'll know how to remove its disguise, how to stop defending it, and how to replace it with the kind of strength that becomes untouchable. Strength that isn't just discipline for a day, but identity for a lifetime. And when you reach that point, nothing, not pressure, not failure, not fear, will be able to drag you back to the old version of yourself. So let's begin. Imagine this. You wake up determined. You tell yourself, today I'll change. Today I'll finally take control. You feel the spark, the intention, the quiet fire inside your chest. But before you even leave your bed, weakness is already there, waiting. It doesn't confront you like an enemy. It doesn't shout, stop. Instead, it whispers, just 5 more minutes. Start later. Take it easy today. And because the voice is soft, almost reasonable, you obey without noticing. That's how it works. Not with dramatic collapse, but with subtle permission. Weakness doesn't need to break you all at once. It just needs to win the small battles that no one else sees. And each time it wins, you lose something bigger than a task or a moment. You lose trust in yourself. Most people never realize this. They believe weakness shows up in obvious ways: quitting, failing, refusing to try. But that's not the real danger. The weakness that destroys your life is disguised. It hides inside decisions so small, so ordinary, you don't even name them as weakness. I'll do it later. It's not that urgent. I'll make up for it tomorrow. And with every quiet compromise, the gap between who you are and who you want to be grows wider. Stephen Covey taught that your life is not shaped by what you shout in public, but by what you whisper to yourself in private. That's why this invisible weakness is so powerful. It doesn't look like failure. It looks like balance. It looks like logic. It looks like taking care of yourself. And because of that disguise, you defend it. You let it stay. You even believe it's helping you. But here's the truth. The weakness you defend is the same weakness that's slowly burying your potential. It convinces you that delaying is harmless, but what it's really doing is training your mind to settle. Every postponed action becomes a message to yourself. My word doesn't matter. My future can wait. And once those messages repeat often enough, they stop being choices and become identity. That's why so many people feel stuck year after year. Not because they lack ambition, but because their weakness has become who they are. They don't even fight anymore. They live in quiet negotiation, trading the life they want for the comfort of the moment, over and over again. Think about the last promise you made to yourself. Maybe it was about your health, your discipline, your relationships, your dreams. You said you would change. You said you would start. But then came the whisper, not today. And because it sounded reasonable, you agreed. A day passed, then a week, then a year. And the promise is still waiting, while life moves forward without you. This is how invisible weakness wins. Not by knocking you down, but by keeping you still. It convinces you you're safe, while it quietly steals your future. And the tragedy is that you don't notice until years have already been lost. This is how invisible weakness wins. Not by knocking you down, but by keeping you still. It convinces you you're safe, while it quietly steals your future. And the tragedy is that you don't notice until years have already been lost. You see it in the promises that never leave your notebook, in the goals that fade into someday, in the version of yourself that feels further away each morning. It doesn't take a dramatic collapse to ruin a life. Only tiny concessions, stacked one on top of another, until the weight becomes unbearable. And the most dangerous part? Those concessions don't announce themselves. They slip into your routine quietly, hidden in the ordinary choices that seem harmless at first. It starts the moment you wake up. The alarm rings, and instead of standing up, you negotiate. 5 more minutes. That's not rest. It's surrender in disguise. Later in the day, you sit down to work. But before starting the task that matters most, you convince yourself, I should just check my messages first. 10 minutes disappear, then 20, then an hour. And when the day ends, you tell yourself the lie that has stolen more dreams than failure ever could. I'll get serious tomorrow. This is how weakness infiltrates your life. It doesn't arrive with a hammer. It arrives as a whisper. And the whisper is always reasonable. That's why you don't resist it. It tells you to delay, to avoid, to stay comfortable. And you obey, because in the moment, it feels harmless. Stephen Covey used to say that the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. But weakness flips this upside down. It makes you spend hours on what's urgent, what's easy, what's comfortable, while the things that truly matter are quietly pushed aside. The emails get answered, the small tasks get done, but the project that could change your life? That one waits, and waits, until waiting becomes permanent. Look closely, and you'll see the pattern everywhere. You know you should have that honest conversation with someone you love, but you tell yourself, not now. It's not the right time. You know you should invest in your health, but you convince yourself, I'll start when things calm down. You know you should take the first step toward your dream, but you whisper, when I feel ready. And so the weakness grows roots in your routine, disguised as patience, disguised as logic, disguised as being realistic. But here's the truth. Weakness never feels like weakness while it's happening. It feels like relief. Relief from discomfort. Relief from effort. Relief from risk. That's why it's so dangerous. You don't feel the destruction in the moment. You only feel it years later, when the compounding of small concessions has built a life you no longer recognize. And this is the cruel part. The weakness that infiltrates your routine doesn't just shape your schedule. It shapes your identity. Every time you say later, you're training yourself to become someone who doesn't follow through. Every time you avoid the hard thing, you're rehearsing the role of someone who stays small. And eventually, you don't even see it as weakness. You see it as just who I am. But that's a lie. You're not weak by nature. You've simply been practicing weakness over and over until it became habit. And habits become character. Covey emphasized this often. Sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. The weakness in your routine isn't just stealing time. It's sculpting the destiny you're walking into. Pause and reflect. Where does it show up for you? In your mornings, when you avoid starting. In your work, when you chase distractions instead of progress. In your relationships, when you leave words unsaid because honesty feels risky. Once you see it, you realize it's everywhere. And that realization stings, because it forces you to confront the truth. You've been letting weakness sit in the driver's seat far more often than you admit. But don't confuse recognition with defeat. Seeing it clearly is the beginning of freedom. Because now, each time you hear the whisper, you know it's not harmless, it's a test. Each later is not just a choice, it's a rehearsal of identity. And if identity is shaped by repetition, then every small victory against weakness is proof that you're becoming someone else. And here's the shift. The routine that once felt automatic no longer has to own you. Weakness may slip into your mornings, your afternoons, your evenings, but it doesn't have to decide your future. Because the same way weakness compounds into destruction, strength compounds into transformation. And it always starts in the same place, the smallest choices. The price of weakness is never obvious at first. One skipped workout doesn't ruin your health. One avoided conversation doesn't end a relationship. One delayed decision doesn't destroy a dream. That's why weakness is so seductive. It hides its cost. It whispers, "This doesn't matter." And in the moment, you believe it. But here's the truth. The cost of weakness is always delayed, but it's never denied. Every choice accumulates. Every compromise compounds. And the bill always comes due. Think about it. No one wakes up one morning suddenly unhealthy, broke, or stuck in a life they hate. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. Missed days at the gym turn into years of neglect. Spending just a little beyond your means turns into crippling debt. Postponing meaningful work until someday turns into decades of waiting. Weakness is patient. It doesn't need to break you overnight. It only needs to keep you comfortable until it's too late to change. Stephen Covey warned about this when he said, "We become what we repeatedly do." That's the brutal math of weakness. The things you do once in a while matter far less than the things you let slide every single day. And while you excuse them as harmless, they're quietly carving your future. Picture this. You're standing at a fork in the road. To the left is comfort, the easy choice, the delay, the surrender. To the right is growth, the uncomfortable action, the risk, the decision you know matters. Every day, you take a step, and every step builds distance. The danger isn't in one step left or right. The danger is in walking left every day for a year. Because by then, you're not a few steps off course. You're in a completely different life. And here's the cruelest part. Weakness never punishes you immediately. It lets you feel fine, sometimes even rewarded. Skip a workout? You get to rest. Delay a project? You avoid stress. Avoid a hard conversation? You escape discomfort. In the moment, weakness feels like relief. But over time, that relief becomes regret. Regret is the true price of weakness. Not the failure of one day, but the silent erosion of years. The realization that you had chances, moments, and opportunities, and you traded them away for nothing more than comfort. Regret doesn't shout at you. It waits until the years have passed, until the time is gone, and then it whispers the question no one wants to face. What could you have been? Think about that question. What could you have been if you had stopped listening to weakness 5 years ago? What if you had started that project, taken that risk, faced that fear? Where would you be today? That gap between what you are and what you could have been, that's the debt weakness makes you pay. And it always charges interest. But this is not just about lost opportunities. Weakness doesn't just steal your future, it poisons your present. Because every time you surrender, you carry guilt. You feel the weight of promises broken to yourself. And that weight follows you into everything else. That's why you feel tired even when you've done nothing exhausting. That's why you feel restless even when your life looks fine on the outside. You're carrying the hidden cost of weakness, the knowledge that you've been betraying yourself. Covey often emphasized integrity, the ability to align your actions with your deepest values. But when weakness rules you, integrity shatters. You act in ways that contradict who you want to be. And deep down, you feel it. That inner conflict is exhausting. It drains your energy, your confidence, your joy. That's why weakness doesn't just destroy results, it destroys identity. Because little by little, you stop believing in yourself. And when you stop believing in yourself, you stop trying. That's the final cost of weakness. It convinces you you're not capable, not worthy, not strong enough to change. You no longer see yourself as someone who can rise. You see yourself as someone destined to remain stuck. And once weakness has rewritten your identity, it doesn't even need to fight anymore. You'll keep yourself trapped. But here's the good news. Just as weakness compounds into destruction, strength compounds into transformation. The smallest acts of courage, the tiniest decisions of discipline, also accumulate. One honest conversation restores trust. One workout reignites momentum. One small commitment kept begins to rebuild belief. And belief is everything. So don't underestimate the cost of weakness, and don't underestimate the power of one choice to break its pattern. The price of inaction is far greater than the discomfort of action, because discomfort lasts a moment, but regret lasts a lifetime. And if you can feel that truth pressing on you right now, don't ignore it. That pressure is not punishment, it's possibility. It's the signal that you're still in the fight, that weakness hasn't won completely. The question is whether you'll listen to that signal or let the whisper of weakness drown it out again. Because once you understand the cost, once you feel the weight of what weakness has already stolen, you can no longer tell yourself it's harmless. You see it for what it is, the most expensive lie you've ever believed. And that clarity, that raw awareness, is the beginning of change. When weakness begins to shape your life, most people don't admit it. They cover it. They build masks. On the outside, they appear strong, busy, productive, in control. But inside they know. And that gap between appearance and reality is where the false strength lives. Think about how often people equate being busy with being strong. The packed schedule, the endless meetings, the constant activity, it all looks like discipline. But busyness isn't strength. It's often just avoidance in disguise. It's filling every hour so you don't have to face the deeper battles inside. You convince yourself you're moving forward, but movement without meaning is just noise. There's another mask, overcompensation. You know the areas where you're weak, so you cover them with exaggerated effort in other places. You avoid the hard work of discipline in your health, so you throw yourself into work. You avoid honesty in your relationships, so you hide behind achievements. To the world, you look accomplished. But deep down, you know you're out of balance. And the success feels hollow because it's built on a foundation you know can't hold. Stephen Covey often spoke about the inside-out approach. Real strength begins within and flows outward. But many live the opposite. They build a facade outside while neglecting the foundation inside. And when pressure comes, the facade always cracks. Because false strength has no roots, it's performance, not principle. Think of the person who brags about how much they work, but can't sit alone with their own thoughts without feeling restless. Or the one who posts their victories online, but avoids the mirror because they know the truth. False strength seeks validation, applause, distraction. Real strength doesn't need any of it. It's quiet, steady, consistent, even when no one is watching. The tragedy is that many people spend their whole lives performing strength while secretly being ruled by weakness. And the world often rewards it. Busy people get promoted. Overachievers get praised. Those who hustle endlessly are admired. But inside, the quiet voice knows, I'm not winning the battles that actually matter. That gap between external validation and internal reality creates a life of quiet desperation. And maybe you felt it yourself. On the outside, others might call you disciplined, successful, even admirable. But you know the truth. You know the promises you've broken to yourself. You know the goals you've postponed. You know the areas where weakness has already stolen ground. That awareness eats at you. And the more you try to cover it with noise, the louder it becomes when you're alone. Here's the danger. False strength feels safe in the short term, but it destroys you in the long term. Because when you build your identity on appearance instead of reality, you're living on borrowed time. All it takes is one storm, one setback, one season of pressure, and the mask collapses. And when it does, you don't just lose the facade. You lose yourself. Because deep down, you knew it was fragile all along. Covey warned about this when he taught that private victories precede public victories. In other words, if you're not winning the small, hidden battles within yourself, the victories others see won't last. They'll crumble because the foundation was never real. You cannot outsource strength. You cannot pretend your way into resilience. It has to be built in the quiet, invisible moments where no one else is watching. So let me ask you directly, Are you performing strength, or are you living it? Do you fill your days with busyness to avoid the silence? Do you hide behind achievements to cover the areas where weakness rules you? Do you crave the image of discipline more than the reality of it? These are not comfortable questions, but they're necessary. Because only when you stop lying to yourself can you stop lying to the world. The truth is, you don't need to prove strength, you need to build it. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't show off. It doesn't need applause. Real strength is keeping your word to yourself when no one is there to applaud. Real strength is choosing discipline when it's easier to choose distraction. Real strength is integrity, being the same person in the dark that you are in the light. And once you begin living that way, you'll notice something remarkable. The mask you used to wear becomes unnecessary. You don't need to appear strong anymore, because you are. You don't need to chase validation anymore, because your confidence is rooted in reality. And when storms come, and they will, you won't collapse, because your foundation is not performance, but principle. That's the shift, moving from false strength to real strength. From appearing disciplined to becoming disciplined. From chasing validation to living in alignment. And the moment you choose that path, weakness begins to lose its grip. But here's the challenge. Recognizing false strength isn't enough. You have to decide what comes next. You have to stop hiding behind masks and start confronting the weakness directly. And that confrontation is not easy. It demands honesty. It demands courage. It demands a point of no return. And that moment, that decisive point where you stop excusing weakness and start confronting it, is exactly where we're heading now. There comes a moment in every life when the mask of false strength begins to crack. Maybe it's subtle, a quiet frustration that no amount of success can silence. Or maybe it's violent, the collapse of something you thought would never break. Either way, the truth hits. Pretending is no longer enough. The weakness you've been excusing, defending, disguising, it's not just present. It's in control. And that's the moment of decision. The point of no return. The moment when you realize you cannot keep living on excuses, on masks, on borrowed strength. You either confront the weakness, or you let it define the rest of your life. Most people avoid this moment for as long as possible. They distract themselves. They drown it out with noise, with busyness, with comfort. But it always catches up. You can't escape yourself. Sooner or later, you're left alone with the question you've been avoiding. Am I willing to keep betraying myself? The turning point doesn't come from motivation. It doesn't come from waiting for the perfect time. It comes from a raw, honest confrontation. From looking your weakness in the face and admitting, this has ruled me long enough. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It's painful. But it's also liberating. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself, you stop living as a prisoner. Think about the times in your life when change was real. It never started with comfort. It started with confrontation. With the day you admitted you were tired of breaking promises to yourself. With the night you looked in the mirror and decided, never again. With the moment you stopped excusing and started deciding. That's the point of transformation. And it doesn't require perfection. It requires a choice. A single act of courage that breaks the cycle. That could be saying no to the next negotiation with weakness. That could be keeping one small promise you've broken 100 times before. That could be refusing the whisper that says, tomorrow, and acting today instead. The power is not in the size of the step. It's in the shift of identity it creates. Because here's the truth. Once you choose to confront weakness, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop being the person who always delays, who always excuses, who always breaks down under pressure. You start becoming the person who chooses strength, even in small ways. And identity is built choice by choice, moment by moment, until you no longer recognize the old version of yourself. This is the turning point, when the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of change. When the regret of another wasted year hurts more than the discomfort of one difficult decision. When you finally see that weakness has already taken enough from you, and you refuse to let it steal anymore. It doesn't matter how many times you've failed before. It doesn't matter how many promises you've broken. The turning point isn't about your past. It's about this moment. Right now, the choice you make the next time weakness whispers. That's where everything shifts. And the beauty of this moment is that it doesn't just change your actions. It changes your story. Because once you draw the line, once you decide, I will not live this way anymore, you reclaim control of the narrative. Weakness no longer gets to write your future. You do. So here's the question. Are you willing to confront the part of you that has been quietly destroying you? Are you willing to face the lies you've been telling yourself? Are you willing to step into the discomfort, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to freedom? That's the point of no return. The place where weakness dies and strength is born. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you stopped waiting for the right time and realized the right time is always now. And when that choice is made, something shifts inside. You walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. Not because everything around you is different, but because you finally know you can trust yourself again. And once you trust yourself, you become unstoppable. But don't think the story ends here. Confrontation is only the beginning. Choosing strength once doesn't erase years of weakness. What matters is what happens after. The daily choices that turn confrontation into transformation. Because the moment you confront weakness, it doesn't disappear. It fights back. And that's why the next stage is so critical. Learning how to transform that weakness into real, lasting strength. Confrontation is only the beginning. Real change doesn't happen the moment you see your weakness. It happens in the moments after, when weakness fights back. Because it will. The whispers won't disappear overnight. They'll grow louder, more persuasive, more desperate to keep you the same. And that's why transformation isn't about waiting until you feel ready. It's about choosing a new response in the exact moments you used to give in. Think about it like this. Weakness has been rehearsed for years. Every time you said later, you rehearsed it. Every time you broke your word, you rehearsed it. Every time you chose comfort over growth, you rehearsed it. And anything rehearsed becomes automatic. That's why it feels so natural, so hard to resist. But here's the good news. Strength can be rehearsed the same way. Every time you refuse the whisper, every time you keep a promise, every time you act when you don't feel like it, you're rehearsing strength. And repetition is what rewrites identity. The first step is awareness. You can't defeat what you don't recognize. Start noticing the patterns, the times of day, the emotions, the triggers that make weakness louder. Maybe it's the morning when comfort tempts you. Maybe it's late at night when discipline fades. Maybe it's when stress builds and distraction feels easier than focus. Once you see the pattern, you can prepare for it instead of being ambushed by it. The second step is interruption. Weakness thrives in autopilot. It wants you to respond without thinking, to surrender automatically. That's why breaking the cycle begins with a pause. When the whisper says, "Do it later," stop and breathe. Ask yourself, is this weakness talking or strength? That pause is powerful. It gives you back the ability to choose instead of react. The third step is replacement. It's not enough to resist weakness. You must redirect it. If the whisper says, 5 more minutes in bed, replace it with 5 minutes of movement. If it says, avoid that conversation, replace it with, I'll start with one honest sentence. Small, practical actions are how weakness begins to lose power. Because each time you act differently, you prove to yourself that you're no longer the same person. And here's the beauty. The transformation doesn't come from giant leaps. It comes from stacking tiny victories. One choice, then another, then another. At first, they feel small, almost insignificant. But over time, they compound into unshakable strength. Just like weakness once shaped your identity without you realizing, strength begins to reshape it. Until you look back and wonder how you ever lived the old way. The fourth step is reinforcement. Weakness will always try to return, especially when you're tired, discouraged, or under pressure. That's why you must create reminders of who you're becoming. Write down the promises you've kept. Celebrate the victories, no matter how small. Build evidence that you are no longer the person who negotiates with weakness. Because evidence is what silences doubt. Finally, the fifth step is integration. Strength cannot remain something you try. It has to become who you are. That means no more dividing your life into on days and off days. No more waiting for motivation. No more negotiating with excuses. Transformation is complete when the choices that once felt impossible become automatic. When discipline feels natural. When integrity feels effortless. When strength is no longer what you do. It's who you are. But let's be honest, this isn't glamorous. Transformation isn't about the big moments people see. It's about the hidden battles no one applauds. The morning you get up when no one's watching. The conversation you face even though it terrifies you. The temptation you resist when giving in would be easier. That's where the new self is forged. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. And slowly, something changes. The voice of weakness doesn't vanish completely, but it loses authority. It becomes background noise, no longer the command you obey, but the echo you ignore. And in its place, a new voice grows louder. The voice of strength, the voice of identity, the voice that says, I do what I say I'll do. I don't negotiate. I don't surrender. I don't betray myself anymore. That's the power of transformation. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming unshakable, about proving to yourself, over and over, that you can be trusted. And when you can trust yourself, you stop craving external validation. You stop needing applause, recognition, or permission, because you already carry proof within you. And this is the moment when weakness turns from enemy to teacher. The same weakness that once destroyed you becomes the very pressure that forged your strength. Every whisper resisted, every temptation denied, every battle won adds weight to your foundation, until the weakness that used to bury you becomes the reason you rise. That is transformation, not escape from weakness, but mastery over it. And once you've reached that point, there is no going back. Because you're no longer fighting just to change, you're fighting to protect the person you've become. And that protection, that resolve to never return to the old identity, is where the story reaches its final stage. There's a moment when you realize the battle was never about the world outside. It was never about time, or talent, or circumstance. The real battle has always been inside, between the whisper of weakness and the voice of strength. And every choice you've made has been shaping one of those voices, giving it more power, more control, more authority over your life. Look back for a second. How many times did weakness win without you even noticing? The mornings surrendered. The opportunities delayed. The promises broken. And yet, here you are, still standing. Which means the story isn't over. Weakness has stolen chapters, yes. But the final page has not been written. That belongs to you. And here's the truth you can no longer ignore. The weakness you once defended is not who you are. It was only who you practiced being. Identity is not permanent. It's built, choice by choice, action by action, habit by habit. If weakness can be rehearsed into your life, strength can be rehearsed into your soul. The future isn't about erasing what's been lost. It's about deciding what you'll build from here. Imagine waking up tomorrow and hearing the whisper, stay comfortable, delay, surrender. But this time, instead of obeying, you act, you move, you choose. That one decision will feel small, but it carries a weight larger than you know. Because the second you refuse to betray yourself, you begin to trust yourself again. And a person who trusts themselves is unstoppable. This is what real freedom looks like. Not the absence of weakness, but the presence of strength so consistent, so rooted, that weakness can no longer dictate your story. It may still whisper, but its voice no longer defines you. Because you've chosen to become the kind of person who listens to something greater. So here's the challenge. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Stop excusing the same patterns. Stop letting another year slip away under the disguise of later. The turning point is not out there. It's right now. It's in the next decision you make, the next battle you face, the next moment when weakness whispers and you decide, not this time. And if these words are resonating with you, if you can feel the truth pressing on you, then don't let it fade. Don't close this and go back to old habits. Do something different. Act. And start by joining us here, because this space isn't for people who settle. It's for people who are done negotiating with weakness. So subscribe now. Not for numbers, not for me, but for you. As a reminder that you've drawn a line today, that you will no longer be ruled by the part of you that betrays you. Every new subscriber here isn't just clicking a button, it's making a silent promise. This time, I keep my word. This time, I protect the person I'm becoming. And as you step into this new version of yourself, remember, the journey doesn't end when weakness is exposed. The next challenge is protecting the strength you've built. Because life will test you, pressure will come, temptation will return, and the old whispers will try to pull you back. But you won't face that battle alone. Because the next video will show you exactly how to keep your new identity alive when everything around you tries to drag you back to the old one. So don't stop here. Keep going. Protect what you've built. Because the real story of your strength is only just beginning.